I'm 34, and I thought I had everything figured out. A stable job, a decent house, a husband I trusted, and a younger sister who always looked up to me, at least, I thought she did. My husband, Mark, is 38, calm and reliable, not the dramatic type. We've been married for 6 years. No kids yet, not because we don't want them, but because life just keeps getting in the way. 3 months ago, my younger sister, Kelsey, moved in with us. She's 21, in that messy stage of figuring life out. She'd just dropped out of college after switching majors 3 times and was bouncing between part-time jobs. She asked if she could crash with us just until she got on her feet. Of course, I said yes. She's my sister. She was struggling. What else was I supposed to say? The first few weeks went fine. She was helpful around the house, making dinners, cleaning up, trying to contribute. I actually felt proud of her. Mark was welcoming too, cracking jokes to make her feel at home, picking her up from job interviews, giving her pep talks. He's always been that kind of guy, the calm in the storm. Honestly, it made me love him more. But then, little things started to feel off. At first, it was the scent. Kelsey wears this very specific perfume, sweet but powdery, something you can smell a room away. I started noticing it on Mark. Not faintly. Strong. Like he'd hugged her, or been around her too long, or worse, like he'd worn it himself. I told myself I was being paranoid. She lived with us now. Of course some of her stuff would rub off. Maybe it was on the couch. Maybe it lingered in the hallway. But the smell didn't fade. And it wasn't on me. Then came the change in how Mark acted. He started getting home later. Nothing crazy, an hour here, 90 minutes there. When I asked, he said traffic was bad or he stopped to run errands. Fair enough. But he never used to stop for anything. And he never used to come home smiling when I was clearly exhausted from my own 10-hour shifts. I asked Kelsey once what they'd done while I was out. She shrugged and said just watched TV or he was working on something in the garage. But the way she said it, casual. Flat. Like she didn't care if I believed her or not. Still, I said nothing. I kept it all in. Because I wasn't ready to hear the truth. About a week after I noticed the perfume, something strange happened. I came home early from work. I'd gotten off a few hours ahead of schedule, nothing planned, just wanted to surprise Mark and maybe cook dinner together like we used to. His car was in the driveway. Kelsey's too. I unlocked the door quietly, not because I was sneaking around, but because I didn't want to wake anyone if they were napping. The house was silent. Too silent. I walked toward the kitchen, then stopped. I heard a sound, something like laughter. A quick, breathy giggle, followed by a low voice. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew the tone. That laugh wasn't meant for me. I didn't barge in. I didn't even move. I just stood there, frozen, listening. Then I heard footsteps, 2 sets, fast. A door closed. A second later, Mark's voice called out from the laundry room, like he was trying to sound normal. I stepped into the hallway just as he opened the door and walked out. He looked surprised to see me. Kelsey came out a moment later, barefoot, holding a basket of laundry like it was her alibi. Nothing about it looked wrong. But everything felt wrong. Mark kissed my cheek and said something about running out of detergent. Kelsey said she was just showing him how she organizes her clothes to save space. I smiled. Nodded. Didn't say what I really wanted to say. Why were you both in the laundry room with the door shut? I couldn't prove anything. There was nothing to confront. But the distance in their voices, the way they avoided looking at me, it felt like the walls were closing in. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing that tiny laundry room. The way her hand had rested on the edge of the basket, too casually. Like she was used to being there. The next morning, I noticed something else. Mark's phone was on the bathroom sink while he was showering. Normally he takes it everywhere, even the garage. But this time he left it unattended. Something in me snapped. I picked it up and opened it. He had no lock screen. He always said he had nothing to hide. There weren't any messages between him and Kelsey. But she was in his recent call log. Twice. Once at 11:04 p.m. The night before. The other, a missed call at 2:17 a.m. a few days earlier. She lives in our house. Why would they be calling each other at night? I didn't say anything. Not yet. Because I still wasn't ready. I was scared that once I said it out loud, there'd be no taking it back. But deep down, I already knew. Whatever was happening between them, it wasn't innocent. And it wasn't over. The next day, I decided to test something. I told Mark I'd be working late, made up some nonsense about an end-of-quarter report and meetings running long. He barely reacted. Just nodded, kissed my forehead, and told me to not stress too much. He didn't ask questions. Didn't even offer to bring me dinner like he usually did when I worked late. That alone told me everything I needed. After leaving the house, I parked my car 2 streets over and waited. I didn't have a plan, just instinct. My heart was pounding the whole time. I felt crazy, like some deranged stalker outside her own home. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. About 45 minutes after I left, the porch light flicked off. That was strange. Mark never turned it off if he knew I'd be coming home late. He always said he wanted me to feel safe walking up to the house. I waited another 20 minutes, then walked up to the side of the house. The blinds in the living room were cracked just enough for me to see inside. And there they were. Mark was on the couch. Kelsey was next to him. Her legs were tucked under her, angled toward him, and she was laughing at something on his phone. Their shoulders touched, close, too close. Mark turned and said something, and she reached out, brushing her fingers down his arm like it was nothing. I stood there for several minutes, stomach twisting. No kiss. No obvious signs of cheating. But you don't touch your brother-in-law like that. Not if you respect boundaries. Eventually, I walked back to my car, shaking. I couldn't confront them, not yet. I needed something solid. Something undeniable. I needed truth, not assumptions. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I bought a small, hidden camera off Amazon. One of those nanny cam things disguised as a charger block. I knew it was extreme. I knew it crossed a line. But I was done sitting in the dark while they played house under my roof. When it arrived 2 days later, I plugged it in behind the TV cabinet in the living room, angled perfectly at the couch. It was motion activated, recorded to a cloud account, and looked just like a regular USB plug. That night, I told Mark I was going out for drinks with coworkers. I even put on makeup to sell the lie. He smiled, told me to have fun. I stayed parked at a gas station just a few blocks away, watching the camera feed, waiting. An hour in, they were back on the couch. And this time, they weren't even pretending to keep distance. Kelsey had her feet in his lap. And Mark? He was massaging them. Long, slow strokes up and down her calves while she leaned back with her eyes closed. It looked practiced, familiar, comfortable. I ended the stream and sat in my car for 10 straight minutes, breathing like I'd just run a marathon. No tears. Just rage. And heartbreak. Because this wasn't a flirtation anymore. This was betrayal. And it was unfolding right in my living room. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Mark snored beside me, like he hadn't just spent 2 hours massaging my sister's legs in the same room where we opened wedding gifts. The next morning, I watched him get dressed like everything was normal. He kissed my cheek, said he'd be home early. I smiled and told him to text me if he needed anything. Then I turned on the camera feed the second the door shut behind him. I watched the footage from the night before, frame by frame. After the foot massage, they stayed on the couch. She curled up next to him. He pulled a blanket over both of them. It wasn't romantic, not quite. But it was something worse in a way. Intimate. Like they'd done it before. Like it was just another Tuesday night. Then something happened that made my stomach turn. Kelsey took out her phone and started taking selfies. Not normal selfies either, angled toward both of them, like a couple. At one point, she leaned in and kissed his cheek. He didn't pull away. He just grinned and looked straight at the camera, like he knew. Like maybe he wanted me to see. I felt sick. I checked her social media right away, nothing. Private accounts, no posts. But she was saving them for a reason. Maybe not now, maybe not yet. But people don't take pictures like that unless they think they'll be useful someday. I started going through old texts. I never used to snoop, but now I was desperate. I found nothing concrete between them. But what I did find was worse. Kelsey and I used to message each other constantly, memes, dumb videos, gossip. But for the past month? Almost nothing. Just one-word answers and unread messages. She was pulling away from me long before I noticed anything was wrong. That afternoon, I took off work and drove to my mom's place. I hadn't told her anything yet, didn't want to start a wildfire without proof, but I needed to say something. I told her Kelsey had been acting weird. That I thought she was getting too close to Mark. Her reaction was unexpected. She didn't gasp, didn't defend her. She just went quiet. Then she said, carefully, that Kelsey had always had boundary issues. That she had a habit of inserting herself into other people's relationships, even when she was a teenager. I remembered something, too. When Kelsey was 17, she got caught texting her best friend's boyfriend. Said it was just a joke, but the friendship didn't survive it. My mother gave me a look. One of those looks you only get from someone who knows and doesn't want to say it out loud. She told me, gently, to trust my gut. When I got home that night, I walked in on Kelsey singing in the kitchen, wearing my robe. She laughed when she saw me and said she thought it was okay since I never wore it. Mark came in a few minutes later and acted like nothing was weird. I couldn't take it anymore. So I smiled, sat down at the table, and asked Kelsey if she'd like to move out. Her face fell. Mark stiffened. I told them both I needed the house back to myself. That things were getting too crowded. That it was time. Kelsey looked shocked, hurt even, but not surprised. And Mark? He didn't say a word. Not a single word. That silence said more than anything else ever could. Kelsey didn't leave. At first, she acted like she didn't hear me. She laughed it off, said she'd start looking next week. Then she started staying out later, coming home after midnight with makeup smudged and that same perfume clinging to every room she passed through. I stopped asking questions. But Mark, he started acting different too. Suddenly he was quiet at dinner, avoiding eye contact, eating fast, clearing his plate and retreating to the garage or the bedroom like he was escaping something. Me, maybe. Or maybe his guilt. The silence between us grew so loud I could barely hear myself think. The camera kept recording. Every night I'd review the footage, hoping maybe I was wrong. Hoping they'd be apart, distant, cold. They weren't. One night I caught them dancing in the living room. No music, just the sound of their voices, muffled by the walls. She twirled herself into him, and he caught her like it was rehearsed. She rested her head on his chest. He kissed the top of hers. My chest ached. I stopped the video. Threw my phone across the bed. I didn't want to see more. But I had to. Because I couldn't live like this anymore. That weekend, I told Mark I was going to visit a friend 2 towns over, an overnight trip. Kelsey was there when I said it. They both looked at each other. Just for a second. But long enough. I waited till nightfall. Then, from my friend's guest room, I pulled up the feed again. At first, nothing. An empty living room. A paused movie on the screen. Then, Kelsey walked in. Wearing one of Mark's old hoodies. She curled up on the couch and pulled a blanket over her lap. 10 minutes passed. Then Mark came in, holding 2 glasses of wine. He handed her one, sat down beside her. And then he kissed her. Not on the cheek. Not a mistake. A full, slow kiss. She leaned into it. I felt everything inside me go still. It was happening. It had happened. All this time, the questions, the perfume, the laundry room, the late nights, the silence. It wasn't in my head. It was real. And now I had proof. I didn't cry. I thought I would. Thought I'd break down, scream, lose control. But instead, I just sat there in the dark, watching my marriage implode in real time, feeling hollow. Like the person I used to be had quietly left the room hours ago, and all that was left was this version of me, numb, silent, and calculating. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up making copies of everything, every clip, every screenshot, every timestamp. I made a private drive. I backed it up to a flash. I even emailed the folder to myself with the subject line, just in case. Because I knew what I had to do next. I went home the next morning like nothing happened. Walked in with coffee, said I missed my bed, kissed Mark's cheek before he could flinch away. Kelsey wasn't there. He said she'd gone out early. I smiled and said, hope she finds what she's looking for. Then I waited. Over the next few days, I acted normal. Too normal. I started baking again, something I hadn't done in months. I cleaned the house top to bottom, humming to myself, smiling whenever they walked in. Mark looked uncomfortable. Kelsey avoided eye contact. The tension was thick enough to choke on, but I pretended not to notice. Then came the opportunity. Mark's birthday. We usually did a small thing at home, just the 2 of us. But this time, I made it big. I invited his friends. A few family members. Even his boss. I told everyone I wanted to surprise him. He deserves it, I said, grinning through my teeth. Kelsey offered to help. Of course she did. I told her I wanted the party to be unforgettable. And it was. Because while she helped me hang decorations and stack drinks in the fridge, I was organizing something else entirely. A reveal. Not public. Not loud. But devastating. Mark's best friend, let's call him Darren, has known him since childhood. They've been through everything together. And Darren? He hates cheaters. I remembered him saying once that if Mark ever betrayed me, he'd punch him out cold. So, I invited Darren over early. Just him. When he arrived, I told him I needed help setting up the projector. Said I wanted to show a sweet video montage of Mark's childhood photos. He smiled and said, of course. He didn't know what I was actually queuing up. A 45-second clip. Muted. Clean. Just enough. Mark and Kelsey on the couch. The kiss. Her hand on his chest. The way he pulled her closer. When it played, Darren didn't say a word. He just sat there, mouth open, watching the slow unraveling of a man he once called a brother. When it ended, I turned to him and said, "I'm going to need your help tonight." He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Whatever you need." The party started at 7 p.m. I wore red, fitting, I thought. Mark always said it was his favorite color on me. Said it made me look powerful. I wondered if he'd still say that tonight. People started arriving slowly. Friends from work. A couple of his cousins. Laughter filled the house for the first time in weeks. Music playing. Drinks pouring. Kelsey floated around like she owned the place, hugging people, smiling, acting like the perfect little sister-in-law. She wore a dress I'd never seen before, tight, low-cut, like she wanted to be noticed. She shouldn't have worn that dress. By 8 p.m., Mark was tipsy, glowing from all the attention. He kissed my cheek when I handed him another drink and whispered, "Thank you for this." I smiled and whispered back, "You'll remember it forever." At 8:15, I clinked a fork against a glass and called for a toast. Everyone turned to me, glasses raised. I started with the usual, how Mark was loyal, strong, reliable. How we'd built a life together that I thought was unbreakable. Then I said something that changed the room completely. I want to share a little video I put together. Just a short one. A few people cheered. Mark looked confused. I grabbed the remote and hit play. But it wasn't baby photos. It was them. Mark, Kelsey. That slow, disgusting kiss. The silence that fell was suffocating. Some guests gasped. One of Mark's coworkers actually dropped his glass. Kelsey's face went pale. Mark turned toward me, eyes wide, horror blooming across his face like wildfire. I let it play for exactly 15 more seconds. Then I stopped it. I looked right at Mark and said, "Happy birthday." No one moved. And then Darren stood up. He didn't yell. He didn't throw a punch. He just looked at Mark, shook his head slowly, and said, "You're dead to me." And walked out. Kelsey burst into tears. Ran down the hall and slammed the bathroom door. Mark just stood there, blinking, like he couldn't decide whether to deny it or beg. But I didn't give him the chance. I walked to the front door, opened it wide, and said loudly enough for the whole room to hear, "If you're here for the cake, stay. If you're here for lies, you know where the door is." Half the room followed Darren out. The rest stayed. Because they knew they were watching something unforgettable. Kelsey didn't come out of the bathroom. Not during the party. Not after everyone left. Not even when Mark knocked twice and asked her softly to open the door so they could talk about it. I didn't say a word. I just stood in the kitchen, wrapping up untouched cake and scraping party food into the trash like it was any other night. Eventually, Mark gave up and sat at the kitchen table. He didn't look at me. He didn't touch his drink. He just sat there, head in his hands, silent. I let the silence stretch. Let him sit in the mess he made. After a while, he finally spoke. He said he didn't know how it had gotten that far. That it wasn't what it looked like. That it was a mistake. I told him the only mistake was thinking I didn't already know. He didn't deny it. Not this time. He just sat there, trying to breathe, trying to say something that would rewind the clock. I told him he had two options, leave tonight or I'd start calling people, his job, his mother, his friends. I didn't even raise my voice. I didn't have to. He knew I meant it. And that's when he dropped a bomb I didn't see coming. He told me Kelsey was in love with him. That she'd been the one to initiate everything. That she'd kissed him first. That she told him she couldn't help it, that she'd felt something from the very beginning. He said she even asked if he'd ever leave me for her. I stared at him, blinking. I asked him if he'd considered it. He didn't answer. That was enough. He started packing that night, threw some clothes into a duffel and left the house without looking back. Kelsey came out an hour later, makeup streaked, eyes bloodshot, wearing that same too-tight dress like a ghost of the party. She didn't speak, just stood in the doorway, watching me clean up the last of the plastic cups. I told her she had 3 days to leave. She nodded and went back to her room. 3 days. That was me being generous. Kelsey didn't leave in 3 days. She didn't even pack. Instead, she acted like nothing had happened. Like the party, the video, the fallout, none of it had really sunk in. She walked around the house humming, scrolling her phone on the couch like she owned it. She even tried to make pancakes the next morning, like she was doing me a favor. But I didn't speak to her. Not once. I was done playing the big sister. On day 4, I finally snapped. I told her flat out, if she wasn't out by the end of the day, I'd start tossing her things onto the lawn. No more conversations. No more grace. She just blinked and said, "I don't have anywhere else to go." I told her that should have mattered before she started sleeping with my husband. Her lip curled, and for the first time since the party, her mask cracked. She said I was the problem. That Mark had told her I was cold, distant, that he hadn't felt loved in months. That they understood each other in a way I never could. That she never meant for it to happen, but once it did, it felt right. Then she said something that chilled me. "He would have picked me eventually. You just beat me to the public part." I laughed. I couldn't help it. I told her the only thing she won was a man too cowardly to even admit he wanted her until I forced his hand. And now? She didn't even have that. Because he hadn't called. He hadn't texted. He hadn't come back. She looked smug for half a second, until I pulled out my phone. I showed her the messages. From Mark. 10 of them. All begging me to take him back. Telling me how Kelsey had manipulated him, pressured him, guilted him. That it was a mistake. That he was scared. That he loved me. That he'd do anything to fix it. Kelsey stared at the screen like it was burning her from the inside out. I told her she had until sunset. And then I walked out the front door. I didn't care where she went. As long as it was far from me. She was gone by nightfall. No dramatic farewell. No tears. No begging. Just silence, and an empty room where her things used to be. I found a few strands of her hair on the pillowcase, a tube of lip gloss under the dresser, and a handwritten note in the bathroom drawer, one I wasn't supposed to find. It just said, "I never meant for it to go this far. But I still don't regret it." No signature. No apology. Just those words. I burned it. As for Mark, he kept calling, texting, apologizing, pleading. He even sent flowers, which sat unopened on the porch until the wind knocked them over and I left them to rot. Eventually, I answered one of his calls. I told him I knew exactly what he was sorry for, and none of it was about me. He was sorry he got caught. Sorry the people in his life saw him for who he really was. Sorry the mask slipped. But sorry didn't matter. The divorce was fast. Clean. I had the recordings, the texts, everything. He didn't fight me on the house. He didn't even try to argue when I claimed every last piece of furniture. Maybe he thought groveling would earn points. It didn't. The day he came to sign the final papers, he stood on the porch for a long time before ringing the bell. I opened the door, but didn't let him in. He asked me if I was going to be okay. I smiled. And said, "I already am." Then I closed the door. That was 6 weeks ago. Now, I sleep through the night. I wake up without that pit in my stomach. I started painting again. I rearranged the whole living room, threw out the couch they used to share, got a new one in a different color. Brighter. Lighter. I blocked them both on everything. No social media. No messages. I don't need to know where they are or what they're doing. But people talk. And someone told me Kelsey moved back in with my mom. She lasted 10 days before storming out after a fight. Apparently, she told my mother she ruined everything by taking my side. As for Mark, he's living in a one-bedroom rental near the highway. Lost some clients at work. Darren won't speak to him. His boss, who'd been at the party, quietly reassigned him to a lesser role. I never lifted a finger. I didn't have to. Because they burned their own lives down. And I just stepped out of the fire and kept walking.